In the Trump administration's argument to the court, they basically said anytime any person from any country set foot anywhere in the United States uninvited, that counted as an invasion, which to me seems overly broad. By that definition, we're being invaded by pretty much every country on earth, which can't be true. That can't be the purpose of the act. So I do think that the use of the Alien Enemies Act is outside of the constitutional bounds with which Congress delegates the authority, and I do think that the aliens that are challenging this act currently in Texas are eventually going to win.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Bedford, and I'm here with commentary editor Conn Carroll. Conn, there was a huge dust-up in the media this week, maybe more of an inside baseball dust-up, but the way that the media initially covered the case of a Maryland father, Armando Garcia, who was deported by the Trump administration. Now the Trump administration says somewhat in error. Explain to us what happened with this case.
Sure. So this was an illegal immigrant in the country illegally. He crossed illegally, I think, around 2011. But he was living in Maryland. And the first thing to note about this case is that even though he was flown on the same day as those two other flights filled with Venezuelans, he was actually not deported pursuant to the Alien Enemies Act at all. He was just a regular Title VIII deportee. So what the confusion was, or not really the confusion, is that you have a lot of Democratic Party sympathy outlets who are trying to cast this deportation in the worst possible light. And so they're describing this man as a Maryland father who was legally here in the country, which is just factually not true. So he ended up getting deported to El Salvador, which is actually his home country where he's from. But he was not in any way a legal immigrant who had legal status here. In fact, as his own lawyers said in a filing, the Trump administration had the perfect legal power to deport him to any country in the world except El Salvador, pursuant to an immigration judge's order. So he actually had full due process. He went before an immigration judge. Immigration says you're not here legally, you can be deported. But then the immigration judge did say that because at the time he had a reasonable fear of being persecuted by MS-13 in El Salvador, that he could not be deported to El Salvador. And so the error that the Trump administration admitted is that they didn't see that he could not be deported to El Salvador. So they picked him up because he could be deported. It was still a valid deportation order. They erred in just deporting him to El Salvador.
You mentioned the Alien Enemies Act. Like you said, he was not deported pursuant to the Alien Enemies Act, which the Trump administration has used for Venezuelans, members of the Tren de Aragua game. But interestingly, you and the rest of the Washington Examiner editorial team has written that you don't think that the Trump administration's use of the AEA is well supported by law. Why not?
Sure. So Alien Enemies Act was passed, I think, 1798, and it has been used 3 times, both in the War of 1812 and World War I and World War II. In every single of those conflicts, aliens here in the United States did challenge the constitutionality of the act. Each of those times it went to the Supreme Court, and the aliens lost all 3 times. So the Supreme Court has said in each of these instances that the executive branch does have the power to deport these aliens through an expedited process delineated by the act. However, in each of those cases, you had an explicit declaration of war by Congress. Okay. Now the act does say that an explicit declaration of war is not required, but that doesn't mean that the court or that the president can just say we're being invaded or whatever else without any court oversight. So, and this would be the first time this would be litigated. In the Trump administration's argument to the court, they basically said anytime any person from any country set foot anywhere in the United States uninvited, that counted as an invasion, which to me seems overly broad. By that definition, we're being invaded by pretty much every country on earth, which can't be true. That can't be the purpose of the act. So I do think that the use of the Alien Enemies Act is outside of the constitutional bounds with which Congress delegates the authority, and I do think that the aliens that are challenging this act currently in Texas are eventually going to win.
So you think when this goes to the Supreme Court, this might be one of the cases the Trump administration does not win?
Correct.
But there are some out there that, he's probably on track to win, right?
There's a bunch of them on track, yes.
Yeah. Okay, you also cited this morning to me a WEX editorial about abolishing the TSA. Hot take post 9/11. It's only been like 25 years. All right.
Right. Well, as pointed out in the editorial, if you have ever flown through San Francisco or have taken your family to Disney World and flown through the Orlando airport, you've actually already gone through airports with private security not manned by TSA employees. So when the TSA first took over private security for airports post 9/11, a pilot program was created that at first was only at 5 airports, but has since expanded to 22 airports. And so now that we have a body of 20 plus years of looking at the private airports and the TSA ports, we can compare them. And actually, they're pretty even. If anything, the private airports do better at security than the TSA airports, which of course cost a lot more money and a lot less flexible, and the Democratic Party has been able to unionize and basically use as a source for campaign funds. But most importantly, people are worried about the security part. And both consultants, both inside, outside the TA, GAO, have all done comparisons, and they find that the private airport screenings are actually a little bit better than the public ones. Just one scary stat on this is you had these were actually TSA, they're called red teams. So these are like trained TSA people who are trying to test TSA screeners to see if they can get weapons, explosives past them. They did an experiment in 2015. 95% of the times they tried to get past TSA, they were successful.
Yikes, that's pretty scary.
Yeah, and then they followed that up with a nationwide study, and they were able to get past TSA security 80% of the time. So the TSA is just not providing the level of security that people want. There's no reason for the extra expense. Congress should get rid of it.
Interesting hot take, Conn. Thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely.
You can get more writing from Conn and the rest of the commentary team at washingtonexaminer.com.